We're going. I think we're on. So, all right. Welcome to today's show, Post-Gazette Live. Of course, a little bit late today because we had some very interesting developments, but I got my computer fixed. I have a brand new computer, and hopefully this will take care of some of the issues that I've had over the last couple of days. Of course, as always, get down to Archie's home of 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. So get down to Archie's and have a good time in terms of watching football. And, of course, there's a lot of football to watch. I think Thursday is when the college football playoffs begin again. And, of course, this weekend we've got all kinds of football games. Saturday, of course, is the game that we care about the most. That would be the Steelers, and that would be the Ravens. The Steelers and Ravens, of course, one of the more one of the best rivalries in football. And, of course, I think one of the things about it is, and I wrote about this today in the Post-Gazette, interestingly enough, I feel like in some ways the Ravens might be the best matchup for the Steelers because the Steelers have proven they know how to beat the Ravens. They've won 8 out of 10, of course, as we all know, and that kind of success brings confidence. They are pretty good against Lamar Jackson, and of course they are also in many, many ways they are sort of suited because of the way that they're able to play defense to stop those kinds of running quarterbacks. Now, I will say this, it's not going to be easy, obviously, and I think that if you really, really want to get down to it and give yourselves the opportunity to sort of handicap the game, I mean, I would still say that the Ravens are favored for a reason, and of course it's going to be a difficult game for the Steelers. But like I said before, I don't know that it's going to be as difficult as you think from the standpoint of there are some people who are acting like the Steelers have no chance of going down there and winning. I'm not saying that they're going to go down there and win, but I think they got a better chance than you probably think, and mostly because at the end of the day, the Steelers are in a situation where they are playing a very familiar opponent, and they're playing an opponent that they know how to beat. Here's the other thing I'm going to tell you. They're playing against an opponent that's got a lot of pressure on them. I mean, let's face it, John Harbaugh, for everything we talk about, again, I wrote about this a little bit. For all we talk about Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh as being like these great coaches who are sort of like the guys that are out there that are sort of the gold standard for coaches, they haven't had a lot of playoff success in recent years. In fact, I added it up. Since John Harbaugh won his Super Bowl, which was, I think, 2012 or 13 or whatever year it was, since that year, Tomlin and Harbaugh are combined 6-15 in their last 21 playoff games. And one of those wins was Harbaugh beating Tomlin. So to me, I mean, if you look at it, they've got Lamar Jackson in his prime now. He's considered, one of the best players in the NFL. He's considered an MVP candidate every single year. All that good stuff. Guess what? To whom much is given, much is expected. And both Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh have a lot of pressure on them to start winning some playoff games and really, making some runs into the playoffs. I don't know that people fully understand that kind of pressure, how it actually translates into, creating pressure from the standpoint of if you're a coach and you're a coach and you are a quarterback, you need to win games. And when you don't win games and you don't win playoff games, sooner or later, you know what? It becomes a talking point. It becomes a discussion point. It becomes what, everybody else starts to talk about, which is what, they can't win the big one. So I think that there's a little bit more pressure on the Ravens than there is on the Steelers. Now, the Steelers' pressure is as simple as they haven't won a playoff game in 7 seasons. So if they lose this, obviously there'll be 8 seasons since they've last won a playoff game, and that's significant. There are still, the Mike Tomlin, what I call sycophants in this town who will, just basically, no matter what, will defend him to the death. At some point, winning playoff games has to matter. It has to matter. I don't give a rat's ass how many times you go with non-losing seasons. Sooner or later, are you playing to win in the playoffs, or are you playing to keep some ridiculous streak alive that nobody really cares about at the end of the day? Non-losing seasons to me is one of the dumbest streaks that is out there. Okay, it's great. But I look at the Eagles, for instance. Let's go look at the Eagles, for instance, year by year with the Eagles. And you tell me as a Steeler fan what you would rather do with your team, okay? Eagles year by year. Here we go. So let's go with the Eagles. So the Steelers haven't won, they have not won a playoff game since, 2017 or something like that, right? So that's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the last 8 seasons. Let's go with the last 8 seasons. The Steelers won a playoff game 8 seasons ago. In the last 8 seasons, okay, the Eagles have won a Super Bowl, and they've got to another Super Bowl. But they also had a 4-11 or whatever it was, 4-11-1. There are actually Steeler fans. I'm sorry, the last 7 seasons since the Steelers have won a Super Bowl. I'm sorry, I'm actually doing it wrong. Since the Steelers last won a playoff game, 7 seasons. The Steelers have had 7 non-losing seasons in a row. The Eagles have had actually 6 out of 7. And the one year they were 4-11-1, and they fired the coach that won the Super Bowl 2 years earlier. So you tell me, would you rather have a Super Bowl win, a Super Bowl loss, right, but have to endure a 4-11 season in between, or would you rather be able to say you have non-losing seasons that don't yield a playoff win? It's absolutely ridiculous. There are people that still would try and make the case they'd rather have 7 non-losing seasons in a row because that means we're going to always be in it. You're not always going to be in it. To be honest, out of the last 7 seasons, how many times did you really believe the Steelers really legitimately had a chance to win the Super Bowl? Because that's all that matters. John Harbaugh hadn't been much better. I know he's won a couple of playoff games the last couple of years, but if you look at him since he won his last Super Bowl, he's 3-6 in the playoffs. He's had a bunch of years where he hasn't won a playoff game. I mean, there's pressure on him. So everyone talks about Tomlin and John Harbaugh as like they're the gold standard. I pulled this number out for you just sort of to put it in perspective. Since 2010, right? Mike Tomlin's won 3 playoff games since 2010. Jim Harbaugh, Jim, not John, Jim, who spent 10, 11 seasons or whatever it is at Michigan, he's won 5 NFL playoff games since 2010. All you need to know right there is everything you need to know. Jim Harbaugh has won more NFL playoff games since 2010 than Mike Tomlin, and Jim Harbaugh has been in college for 10, 11 years, whatever it is, however long he was at Michigan. I mean, that's ridiculous, but it's true. So my point is, if you want to talk about the Steelers and the Ravens as the gold standard, at least know what you're talking about. And it bothers me that a lot of people don't. There's still way too many people who get giddy because of this non-losing season streak. Mike Tomlin needs to win on Saturday, and he needs to win, period. John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson need to win as well for a different reason, because they need to prove that they can win in the playoffs and make a run and all that stuff. The reality is, if you think about it, both of these guys have a lot to prove. But if the Steelers don't win Saturday, to me, I don't want to hear about non-losing season stuff because it doesn't really do a whole lot for me. It's kind of boring in many ways. Kind of boring. So, I'm looking at, this game, and I'm just saying, basically, in terms of matchups, it's actually probably the best matchup the Steelers could have got, except if they had got Denver, at Acrisure Stadium right over here. At the end of the day, if they'd have gotten Denver at Acrisure Stadium, that's the best matchup they could have got, obviously. But to me, at the end of the day, if you look at it, this is the best matchup they could have got. They know how to beat Baltimore. They've beat them a bunch recently. It's just one of those things where, if they're going to go win somewhere on the road in the playoffs, at least it's a place where they've proven they can win against a team they've proven they can beat. Now, I don't know if they're going to win. I'm not saying that at all. Okay? I'm not saying that they're going to win. I don't know that I'm picking them to win or not. I got to see how the week plays out. But in terms of matchups, it's probably as good of a matchup as they could have gotten. And I think that's the most important thing here to note. At first I thought maybe Houston was a good matchup, but the problem is I don't know that they're as familiar with Houston. I think Houston's got a really good offensive coordinator. I think going down there, the way that the last 4 or 5 games in this season has played out, I don't know if the Steelers would have been dialed in. They'll be dialed in to go play in Baltimore. It's the one game that that they're going to rise up and try and win. Hopefully we're back here. We should be back. I don't know what just happened. It was something going on with the Wi-Fi. But anyway, I just think if you look at the Steelers and where they're at right now, they've got to do a much better job of winning a playoff game. And if they don't win a playoff game, I don't really want to hear about what's going on. And here's the thing. We're already seeing they're trying to set up excuses for Mike Tomlin. Russell Wilson hasn't been as good down the stretch. And all this other stuff. And, the defense is, hurt because, they've got one cornerback out right now. And there's miscommunications and all this other stuff. We're hearing all of these different excuses already being set up. You know what? Go win the game. Just go win the game. But I look at John Harbaugh and I look at Mike Tomlin, and they're probably more similar than you think than they are different. Here's another interesting thing about Mike. Let's talk about John Harbaugh. Sorry, first 5 years, he was 9-4 in the playoffs and had a Super Bowl championship, and he had been to the AFC Championship game 3 times. 9-4 in the playoffs, right? 9-4 in the playoffs. 3 trips to the Super Bowl. 3 trips to the AFC Championship game. A Super Bowl championship in his first 5 years. Since then, right? He's 3-6 in the playoffs. And that is over the course of more than a decade. Who does that sound like? Mike Tomlin. His first 4 years, right? He was 5-2 in the playoffs and had a Super Bowl championship and another trip to the Super Bowl. Since then, he's 3-9 in the playoffs. So my point is, here's two guys that I think desperately need to win a playoff game. And I feel like if you listen to, and so now, again, I'll give you my thoughts later in the week about who I think is going to win the game. But I will say it's probably the best case scenario for the Steelers, other than being able to play Denver at home. And make no mistake about this, honestly. Make no mistake about this. If they would have played the Chargers here, I think I might have picked the Chargers to win that game. I don't know if I'd have thought that 5 or 6 weeks ago. I think I would right now. Chargers are playing. That's pretty impressive if you ask me. So, I think if a team's not going to beat themselves, it makes it really, really difficult. But either way, I feel like if you look at that from the standpoint of what it is that the Steelers have, I think they might have the best matchup that they could have had. And I think that's the thing that you have to kind of point to and just say, wow, this is a team that has an opportunity, okay, to maybe go and win a game and sort of shock the That's really the totality of what we're talking about here. Dante Jackson might be out, and Mason McCormick, has a cast on his hand. For the most part, the Steelers are really healthy. I know that the Ravens could be without I can't think of the receiver's name, first-round pick, their top receiver. They could be without him. Zay Flowers is his name. They could be without him. It sounds like he's got a knee injury. It could be a problem for them. But at the end of the day, it sounds like there's going to be 6 inches of snow, 3 inches of snow, 6 inches of snow. We keep hearing all kinds of different things. But at the end of the day, so Zay Flowers obviously is a loss for them. But I don't know how big of a loss, because I think that this is going to be a game that you're going to win and lose running the football. And as much as the Steelers like to puff their chests out about how they're a running team and all that other good stuff, guess what? They're not very good at running the football. The Ravens are pretty good at running the football. So, again, I think that, this is going to be a game where the Steelers are going to have to figure out how to get good at what they want to do, which is run the football. I thought one of the things against the Bengals that made no sense to me, and, of course, Mike Tomlin today at his press conference sort of doubled down on it, is the Steelers basically, even though they were playing a Bengals defense that's horrible, and especially against the pass, the Steelers were trying to run the football, and Mike Tomlin kept saying, today he kept saying, when you run the football, you can keep Joe Burrow on the other sidelines, and you can, control the clock, and you can minimize the mistakes you're going to make and all that other stuff. I mean, come on, man. Come on, what are we talking about? He's a guy that talks about not living in his fears. First of all, it backfired because it seemed like the Bengals possessed the ball almost the entire game. And second of all, I thought they took away their aggressiveness and made themselves easy to defend until the end of the game when they got desperate and they went right down the field and scored, and then they had a couple of opportunities for big plays, the last couple of drives. It made no sense to me what they did. And so it really comes down to, in my mind, the Steelers have to figure out who they are and what they are. And if it's going to be a bunch of snow and it's going to be, a horrible game weather-wise and all that good stuff, they're probably going to get a good, healthy dose of Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. How do you counter that? And I think that, in that regard, I just don't know that the Steelers are equipped to do that. They want to be. They want people to think that's the way they play and can play, but they haven't been very good at it. And that's a big problem in my mind. It really is a big problem in my mind. You've got to be able to run the football. If you want to be that team, you've got to be able to dictate, listen, we are going to run the football, okay, when we want to run it. And so that's where I really look at this game and just say, I think the Steelers have an opportunity, okay, to win. I'm not a person that believes that they have no chance to win. I think they've got a chance to win. But I also think that they have a chance to get blown out. So, this week has to be about getting ready to play the Ravens, but also sort of a mindset. I question and wonder how many of the guys in the Steelers locker room really want to play this week and how many of them have already checked out, because it looked to me like the Steelers had a few guys that just didn't want to be there, starting with George Pickens the other night against the Bengals. What do you have? 3-4 drops, had a couple of, plays where he just sort of went down pretty easily. Didn't seem like his heart was really in the game. Didn't seem like he really cared about winning the game. Early on, it seemed like there were some guys on defense that really didn't seem like they cared about winning the game. I don't know. I look at it and I say, I hope that you can get up for a playoff game. If you're George Pickens, regardless of what you are upset about, and obviously he was upset about something. He was upset because he was questioned because Russell Wilson basically said, in the game against the Chiefs that he ran the wrong route or something on that interception. Get over it. Get over it. Come on. And then he was asked about it in the locker room and he got all indignant about it or whatever. And he got, it seemed like he was spent the game pouting. I mean, he's got to come ready to play or the Steelers have no chance of winning. I mean, if they get another effort from George Pickens like they just got against the Bengals, they have no chance of winning. The one thing I will say is Mike Tomlin, do you want to know who else really needs a big day in order to make sure that he can cash in a little bit next year? Russell Wilson. I mean, let's face it. Russell Wilson went from a guy that we were talking about, well, the Steelers might have to pay this guy, I don't know, $40 million a year for 2 years to, you know what? Is $25 million a year for 2 years too much for this guy? I think he could secure $25 million a year if he goes out and has a good playoff game and they win the game and they move on to the next round and he plays reasonably well. But if not, boy, it leaves a lot of questions about next year at the quarterback spot. So this is a huge game for Russell Wilson. It's a big game for Mike Tomlin. Huge game for Russell Wilson. I mean, to a lesser degree, TJ Watt's never been involved in a playoff win. It's a big game for him and that elite quote-unquote defense. But how many defensive players' legacy is tied to winning in the playoffs? Very few. If you're a quarterback, however, your legacy is tied that way. If you're a coach, your legacy is tied that way, and it should be. The whole point of playing in the NFL is to try and win playoff games. And so I think when you look at the Steelers, Corey Trice playing or not playing, I've said it before. I don't care if it's Corey Trice, if it's Beanie Bishop, if it's Cam Sutton, those guys are just sort of guys. Dante Jackson is serviceable. He's better than those other guys, but he's serviceable. So let's not act like they're going to be missing Mel Blount if Dante Jackson can't play. By the same token, if he can't play, it puts their secondary in a bad situation because I just don't think they're good enough back there without all of their starters. Joey Porter Jr. Made a couple of plays in the fourth quarter against the Bengals, but for the most part, it was invisible in a lot of ways for a lot of the game. He's got to play better, obviously. If Zay Flowers isn't playing, obviously it helps the Steelers in that regard. They still have to cover Mark Andrews. They still have to figure out how to get, Lamar Jackson on the ground. There's a lot of different things that have to happen for them in this game. But to me, there's a lot of legacies on the line. And in Russell Wilson's case, there's a playoff. There's a contract as well. That's the big thing. There's a contract. And I think that if he plays well, they're going to be able to pay him a little bit. But if he doesn't play well, and you look at the totality of these last 4 or 5 weeks, I think it's a hard case to make unless he's going to take a steep team discount to come back. And even at that, you've got to think about what you're going to do with Justin Fields next year because he's obviously younger. Are you going to pay him? And if I'm Justin Fields, I'm honestly probably going to go into free agency, and I'm going to basically say, I got to find a team. I have an opportunity to compete for the starting job. I'll take a 1-year deal. It's a prove-it deal, and I'm going to try and win the starting job because if I win it and play well, I can then cash in on my next contract. But as it is right now, he can't cash in. Nobody's paying him big money. Nobody's going to, come after him with the Steelers. The Steelers aren't going to be able to, sign and then trade him or something. But they've got to figure out what they're going to do at the quarterback spot. Honestly, it becomes a lot easier if Russell Wilson wins this game coming up. Because if he does, then all of a sudden you look at it and say, okay, we can give him $25 million a year for 2 years, see what happens. There's a lot of people that are not in favor of that. I don't know. I look around the league and I still think Russell Wilson is better than a number of quarterbacks. But, it's funny. If you look at the AFC, just the AFC, who are the starting quarterbacks? Let's go by seed. Mahomes. Obviously, he's better than Russell Wilson. Josh Allen. Obviously, he's better than Russell Wilson. Lamar Jackson. Obviously, he's better than Russell Wilson. C.J. Stroud. I won't say obviously, but I do think he's probably a little better than Russell Wilson. I don't know that it's as big of a gap as I would have said last year. I think C.J. Stroud took some strides back, but I give him a slight edge. Obviously, the 5th seed is Wilson. The 6th seed is Justin Herbert. I'm sorry, the 5th seed is Justin Herbert. He's better than Russell Wilson. The 6th seed is Wilson. The 7th seed is Bo Nix. If I told you right now the Steelers have the opportunity to have last year or Russell Wilson, who are you basically saying? Who are you basically saying? That's what I would love to know. So to me, again, I think you're taking Bo Nix all the time. Forget about, Forget about it. I think you're taking Bo Nix over Justin Fields as well. If you want to, compare young versus young or whatever. Okay, good. At the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. So I think really when we get to the point where we start dissecting the playoffs, it is fair to suggest, at least suggest, it's fair to suggest that the Steelers might have the weakest quarterback in the AFC that's still alive in the playoffs. But I don't know that necessarily means he's bad. It just means the other guys are a little better. In some cases, a lot better. The other thing is, I keep hearing about MVP, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Josh Jackson, Lamar Allen, whatever. The most valuable player in the NFL is Patrick Mahomes. Every single year, he's healthy. It's now become the Jordan thing, where they just, or even the LeBron thing for a while, where they just don't want to give him the MVP because, it's too easy. But I look at the AFC, and I look at all these teams that are playing, and I say, good luck. All of you are playing for second. All of you are playing for second to the Chiefs, until one of you proves you can go to Kansas City and beat the Chiefs. Yes, they've got a good defense and everything else, but guess what? They've won a bunch of games late because basically Patrick Mahomes said, okay, you know what? Cracked his neck, went out on the field and said, okay, you know what? We've been jerking around long enough. Let's go. and went right down the field and scored and got, led to last second wins, either by field goal or whatever. He's the best player in the league. He's the most valuable player in the league. And until somebody proves to me that they can go to Kansas City and beat them, I don't even know what we're talking about anyway. We got a lot to get to this week when it comes to the Steelers. Tomorrow we'll get more into the Steelers-Ravens, the actual physical matchup. We'll do a bunch of other stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the day, this is shaping up to be, it could be a really interesting game, and mostly because every time these two teams play, except for the last time, obviously, it is interesting. Until tomorrow, enjoy your night. We'll do it again at 5 tomorrow.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.